My name is Claire, and I am 43 years old. The worst moment of my life did not happen in a courtroom or a hospital room. It happened in my own dining room, at my own Christmas table, while I was passing a bowl of mashed potatoes to a woman my husband swore I never had to worry about. Her name is Vanessa, and she was sitting in my chair. Not literally at first. That would have been too obvious even for him. But she was sitting in the spot where I always sat, the one facing the window, because I liked to watch the snow falling over the backyard while we ate. Mark had set the table that morning while I was upstairs curling my hair. He said he wanted to help. I remember thinking how sweet that was, how thoughtful. He even used the good china, the wedding set my mother gave us 15 years ago that I only brought out for Thanksgiving and Christmas. He placed Vanessa right in front of the window, and he placed me at the far end of the table next to the wall with my back to everything. I did not say anything. That is the part that still makes me angry when I think about it. Not what he did, what I let him do. I smiled. I poured her wine. I asked about her drive from Portland. I complimented her earrings, which were small diamonds in the shape of snowflakes, and she touched them like she had been waiting for someone to notice. She told me Mark had given them to her 10 years ago, for a Christmas they spent together in Vermont. She said it like it was a funny story, like we were old friends swapping memories. Mark laughed. He actually laughed. I looked at my daughter. Sophie was 14 then. She had just gotten her braces off the week before, and she kept running her tongue over her teeth like she could not believe they were smooth. She was sitting across from Vanessa, pushing her green beans around her plate without eating any of them. She would not look at me. That should have been my first real clue. Sophie always looked at me. When something was wrong, when something was funny, when she was scared in the middle of the night and needed to know if the creak in the hallway was just the house settling, she always found my eyes. But not that night. That night, she stared at her green beans like they held the answer to a question she was too afraid to ask. The dinner was perfect. That was the horror of it. The ham was glazed just right. The rolls were warm. The fireplace was crackling. Mark had even hung garlands over the doorways, which he had never done once in all our years of marriage. I remember noticing the garlands and feeling a little thrill of happiness. I thought he was trying. I thought maybe the rough patch we had been in the late nights at work, the distance, the way he looked at his phone instead of at me, was finally ending. I thought he was coming back to me. Vanessa stayed for 4 hours. 4 hours. She helped me load the dishwasher. She told Sophie she was beautiful. She hugged Mark goodbye at the front door, right there on our porch, under the string lights I had hung myself the day after Thanksgiving. And the hug lasted too long. Not dramatically long. Not the kind of long that would make a suspicious woman raise an eyebrow. It was the kind of long that two people share when they have said goodbye 1,000 times before, and neither of them is in a hurry to stop. I closed the door. I turned to Sophie. She was already walking upstairs, her hand on the banister, her head down. I asked her if she had a good time. She said yes. That was all. Just yes. Then she disappeared into her room and closed the door, and I heard the lock click for the first time in her life. Mark went to the living room and poured himself another glass of bourbon. I stood in the kitchen with my hands in the soapy dishwater, staring at the empty seat at the head of the table, the one where Vanessa had been sitting. The window behind it was dark now. The snow had stopped. I could see my own reflection in the glass, my hair falling out of its clip, my cheeks flushed from wine and heat, my eyes trying very hard to believe something that was not true. I dried my hands. I went upstairs. I knocked on Sophie's door. She did not answer. So I sat on the floor in the hallway, my back against the wall, and I waited. 10 minutes, 20. Finally, the lock clicked. The door opened a crack, and Sophie looked at me with the face of someone who had been holding something so heavy for so long that her arms had gone numb. She said, "Mom, I need to tell you something, but you have to promise me you won't scream." That was the moment. Right there, on the hallway floor, in my Christmas dress with the smell of ham still on my hands. That was when I knew my marriage was already over. I just did not know yet how long it had been dying, or how many times Mark had been the one holding the knife. I met Mark in the summer of 2008. I was 29, recently divorced from a college sweetheart who turned out to be sweet only until he got comfortable, and I was not looking for anything serious. I was working as a nurse at Providence Hospital in Portland, Oregon, 12-hour shifts in the ICU, and my life was small and manageable and exactly what I needed. I lived in a one-bedroom apartment above a bakery, and every morning I woke up to the smell of sourdough, and every night I fell asleep to the sound of rain on the fire escape. I was healing. Slowly. Quietly. The way you heal when no one is watching and no one is rushing you. Mark was a physical therapist at the same hospital. I had seen him in the hallways 100 times before I ever spoke to him. He was tall and quiet, and he always held the elevator door for people, even when he was in a hurry. That is what I noticed first. Not his face, which was handsome enough, or his voice, which was low and warm. It was the way he waited. He seemed like a man who had time for people. After my first husband, who made me feel like a burden every single day, that waiting felt like a gift. Our first real conversation happened in the hospital cafeteria. I was sitting alone eating a yogurt that had been in my bag since breakfast, and he sat down across from me without asking. I remember thinking that was bold. I remember liking it. He asked me about my day. I told him about a patient I had lost that morning, a 70-year-old man whose family never made it to the hospital in time to say goodbye. Mark listened. He did not try to fix it or explain it away. He just sat there with his coffee and let me be sad. At the end of my break, he touched my hand for 1 second and said, "You're good at your job because you feel things. Don't let anyone tell you that's a weakness." I fell in love with him in that moment. Or maybe I fell in love with the idea of being seen. Either way, it felt real. And for the first few years, it was real. We got married in my mother's backyard on a cloudy September afternoon. I wore a cream-colored dress I found at a vintage shop downtown. Sophie was born 11 months later, crying before she was fully out of me, like she already knew the world was too bright and too loud and too much. Mark cried too. He held her against his chest, and he looked at me with so much tenderness that I forgot every bad thing that had ever happened to me. I thought I had finally arrived at the life I was supposed to have. The early warning signs were there. I see that now. But they were so small, so easy to explain away, that I almost feel embarrassed listing them. He worked late a lot. But physical therapists worked late sometimes, especially when patients need extra sessions. He was protective of his phone, but everyone is protective of their phone, aren't they? That is not a crime. He stopped wanting to visit my sister on weekends. But my sister talks too much, and her husband watches sports too loudly, and I did not blame him for wanting to stay home. Each sign by itself was nothing. A shadow in the corner of a photograph, a text message he turned away to read, a weekend trip he took to Seattle for a continuing education course that he never mentioned again. I convinced myself I was being paranoid. My first marriage had broken me in ways I did not fully understand. I had spent years waiting for the other shoe to drop with Derek, and when it finally did, when I found the receipts, the hotel charges, the lies I promised myself I would never be that woman again. The woman who snoops. The woman who accuses. The woman who makes her own fears into a self-fulfilling prophecy. So I did the opposite. I trusted Mark completely. I gave him the benefit of the doubt every single time. I told myself that a good wife does not interrogate her husband. A good wife creates a home so warm that her husband would never want to leave. I created that home. I painted the walls. I planted the garden. I learned to cook his mother's recipes, even the ones that took all day. I rearranged my work schedule so I could be there for Sophie's school plays and doctor's appointments so Mark could focus on his career. I gave him my body and my time and my future, and he took all of it. He took it the way you take a glass of water when you're thirsty, without thinking, without thinking, without ever wondering who filled the glass in the first place. The year before the Christmas dinner, things got worse. Mark started traveling for work more often. He said his boss wanted him to open a new clinic in Bend, and he needed to spend time there to get it off the ground. I believed him. I packed his bags. I kissed him goodbye. I texted him every night before bed, and he always texted back short messages. But messages. Miss you. Can't wait to be home. Tell Sophie I love her. I saved every single one of them. I have always been the kind of woman who saves things. Receipts. Photographs. Text messages. I did not know then that this habit would save me. I thought I was just sentimental. Sophie knew before I did. That is the part that breaks my heart when I think about it. She was 12 when she first saw something she should not have seen. Mark left his laptop open on the kitchen table. He was in the shower. Sophie was looking up a video for a school project, and she opened a new tab, and his email was already open. She saw his messages to Vanessa. Dozens of them, going back years. She did not understand all of it. She was 12, but she understood enough. She understood that her father was telling another woman he loved her. She understood that he had been doing it for a very long time. She did not tell me. She told me later that she was scared. Scared that I would fall apart. Scared that we would lose the house. Scared that Mark would leave and she would have to choose between us. So she carried it alone for 2 years while I smiled at the dinner table and poured Vanessa's wine and asked about her drive from Portland. My little girl carried a mountain on her back so I would not have to carry a stone. On that Christmas night, sitting on the hallway floor in my green dress, she finally set the mountain down. She said, "Mom, he never stopped loving her. He just got better at hiding it." I did not scream. I promised her I would not, and I did not. But I sat there for a long time in the dark with my hand on her knee, feeling the shape of everything I had lost before I even knew it was gone. I did not confront him that night. That is important for you to understand about me. I am not a woman who explodes. I am a woman who freezes, then thinks, then acts. That night, I froze. I sat with Sophie until she fell asleep, her head in my lap, her breathing slow and uneven like she had been crying so long her body had forgotten how to be calm. Then I went downstairs. Mark was already in bed. The bourbon glass was on the nightstand, empty except for a single melting cube of ice. He was on his side, facing away from me, and I could tell by the shape of his shoulders that he was not asleep. He was waiting. He knew. He had to know that Sophie had seen something, that she had finally said something, that the whole careful house of cards was about to collapse. I did not say a word. I got into bed. I lay on my back and stared at the ceiling and listened to him breathe for 3 hours until the sky started to lighten. And in those 3 hours, I made a decision. I was not going to scream. I was not going to cry. I was not going to beg him to explain or to choose me or to tell me what was real and what was not. I was going to wait. I was going to watch. And I was going to make sure that when I finally spoke, I had every single fact in my hands. The next morning was Christmas Day. Sophie came downstairs with red eyes and a smile she had practiced in the mirror. Mark made pancakes. I drank coffee. We opened presents like a normal family. He gave me a cashmere sweater, pale blue, the exact color I had pointed out in a store window 6 months earlier. He remembered. He always remembered things like that. That was part of his genius. He could betray you and buy you the perfect gift in the same breath, and you would spend years trying to figure out which one was real. I wore the sweater. I thanked him. I kissed his cheek. And I started my work. Over the next 2 weeks, I did not change anything about my behavior. I was still Claire, still warm, still trusting, still leaving my phone on the counter and my laptop open and my heart right where he could find it if he bothered to look. But underneath that, I was building a case. I started with the phone records. We had a shared family plan his idea years ago because he said it would save us money. I logged into the account and downloaded every single bill from the past 3 years. The calls to one number, a Portland area code I did not recognize, happened daily, sometimes multiple times a day, early in the morning, late at night, during the hours he was supposedly driving between appointments. I looked up the number. It belonged to Vanessa Reyes. I knew her full name now. I knew her address. I knew she worked at a dental office in Southeast Portland, the one with the cartoon tooth on the sign. I had driven past it 100 times. Then I checked the credit card statements. Mark thought I never looked at them. He was right. I had trusted him completely, so I never looked at anything. But now I looked. Hotel charges in Seattle, in Bend, in Vancouver. Restaurant charges for two. A jewelry store in the Pearl District. The same weekend he told me he was visiting his brother in Tacoma. I matched each charge to a date, each date to a text message he had sent me. Working late, long drive home. Can't wait to see you tomorrow. The lies were so small, so ordinary, that they almost did not look like lies at all. They looked like the life of a man with responsibilities, a man who deserved the benefit of the doubt. I stopped giving him the benefit of the doubt on New Year's Eve. We went to a party at our neighbor's house. Janet, from across the street, a retired teacher with a love for sparkly sneakers and cheap champagne. She pulled me aside in the kitchen and asked if I was okay. I said I was fine. She looked at me with the kind of eyes that have seen things, the kind of eyes that come from grading papers for 30 years and knowing exactly when a student is lying. She said, "Claire, I have known you for a decade. You are not fine. And you do not have to be." I started crying right there in Janet's kitchen, next to the shrimp platter and the bottle of Andre. I told her everything, or almost everything. I did not have the whole picture yet, but I had enough. Janet said something that changed everything. She said, "You are a nurse. You know how to document. You know how to build a timeline. You know how to build a timeline. You know how to present evidence. Treat this like a patient chart, cold, factual, unstoppable." So that is what I did. I met with a lawyer on January 4th, Her name was Margaret Chow, and she worked out of a small office downtown that smelled like old books and green tea. I brought her everything I had: the phone records, the credit card statements, a list of dates and times and lies. She read through it all without changing her expression, and when she looked up, she said, "This is good, but we need more. We need something undeniable: a text, a photo, a witness." I asked her how long I should wait. She said, "Until you cannot stand it anymore, and then wait one more day." I waited 6 weeks. 6 weeks of smiling. 6 weeks of cooking his dinners and washing his clothes and sleeping next to his warm body while knowing exactly where that body had been. 6 weeks of watching Sophie watch her father, her face so carefully blank that it broke my heart every single morning. And then, on a rainy Tuesday in February, I got what I needed. Mark left his phone on the kitchen counter while he took a shower. He had never done that before. He was always careful. But that morning, Sophie had spilled cereal on his bag, and he had rushed upstairs to clean it up, and for 3 minutes his phone was just sitting there, unlocked, open to his messages. I did not even have to search. The conversation with Vanessa was right there, the latest message glowing up at me like a dare. "Vanessa, I can't keep doing this. You have a wife. You have a daughter. When are you going to tell them?" "Mark, after Sophie's birthday? I don't want to ruin that for her." "Vanessa, you mean you don't want to look like the bad guy?" "Mark, I'm not the bad guy. I'm just a man who made a choice." I read those words 6 times. Then I took a photo of the screen with my own phone. Then I put his phone back exactly where I found it, and I went upstairs and I knocked on the bathroom door. Mark opened it with a towel around his waist, water dripping down his face, smiling at me like I was the most important person in his world. I smiled back. I said, "I'm taking Sophie to her orthodontist appointment. I'll be back by noon." He said, "I love you." I said, "I know you do." And I walked out the door with the truth in my pocket and the first real peace I had felt in years settling over my shoulders like a winter coat. The week after I took that photograph, I stopped being a wife and started being a strategist. That is the only way I can describe it. Something in me shifted, not into anger, not into bitterness, but into something much more focused. Margaret had told me to wait until I could not stand it anymore, and then wait one more day. I had done that. Now it was time to move. I opened a separate bank account at a credit union across town, one Mark did not know about. I started depositing small amounts from each paycheck: $200 here, $300 there. Not enough to trigger any alerts, not enough to make him look twice at our joint account. Just enough to build a bridge out of my own marriage. I also made copies of every financial document in the house: tax returns, mortgage statements, retirement accounts, the deed to the house, which was in both our names but had been paid for mostly with money I inherited from my father after he passed. That detail mattered. Margaret said it would matter a great deal. I stopped doing things for him. Not dramatically, not in a way he would notice. I just gradually, quietly stopped. I stopped packing his lunches. I stopped ironing his work shirts. I stopped texting him during the day to ask how his morning was going. He did not seem to notice any of it. That told me everything I needed to know. If he had asked, I might have wavered. If he had said, "Claire, you seem distant. Is everything okay?" I might have broken down and told him everything and let him talk me into staying. But he did not ask. He was too busy, too distracted. Too distracted, too busy building a life with Vanessa while I was still standing in the middle of it. Sophie knew something was happening. She was 14, almost 15, and she was not a child anymore, no matter how much I wanted her to be. She started watching me the way I had been watching Mark. Carefully, quietly. One night, she came into my room while I was sitting on the bed with a notebook, writing down dates and times and amounts. She sat down next to me and looked at the pages and said, "You're leaving him, aren't you?" I told her the truth. I said yes. She did not cry. She did not get angry. She just nodded and said, "Good. Can we take the piano?" It was Grandma's. That was the moment I knew my daughter was going to be okay. She was not thinking about what she was losing. She was thinking about what she wanted to keep. I met with Margaret again on February 22nd. I brought her everything: the photographs, the texts, the phone records, the credit card statements, the bank account information, a handwritten timeline of every suspicious trip and late night and lie I could remember. Margaret spread it all out on her conference table and looked at it the way a general looks at a map before a battle. Then she asked me a question I had not expected. She asked me what I wanted. Not what I wanted to do to Mark. Not what I wanted to take from him. What I wanted for myself. I thought about it for a long time. I thought about the bakery below my old apartment, the one where I used to wake up to the smell of sourdough. I thought about the quiet mornings before Sophie was born, when my life was small and manageable in mine. I thought about the woman I was before I started trying so hard to be the woman everyone else needed me to be. And I said, I want the house. I want full custody of Sophie, and I want him to feel the weight of what he did without me having to scream it at him. Margaret smiled. It was not a warm smile. It was the smile of someone who knew something you did not. She said, I can get you all of that, but you have to trust me, and you have to keep pretending until I tell you to stop. So I did. I kept pretending for another 3 weeks. I made dinner. I watched TV with Mark on the couch. I let him hold my hand during a movie. I listened to him talk about the new clinic in Bend, about how busy he was, about how things would slow down soon, about how he wanted to take me to Italy for our anniversary. Italy. He said Italy while he was texting Vanessa goodnight from the bathroom. I sat there on the couch with the cat in my lap and I smiled and I said Italy sounded wonderful. The end came on March 17th, St. Patrick's Day. I remember because Mark came home wearing a green tie I had never seen before, and Sophie looked at me across the dinner table with an expression that said, Today. I gave her the smallest nod. She excused herself and went upstairs. I waited until Mark finished his second beer. Then I stood up, walked to the front door, and opened it. Vanessa was standing on the porch. I had called her that afternoon, not to scream at her, not to beg. I had simply called the dental office, asked for her, and said, This is Claire, Mark's wife. He told you we were separating. We are not. And I think you deserve to know the truth before he lies to you too. She had not believed me at first. Of course she had not. Mark had been telling her for months that we were already done, that I knew about them, that we were just staying in the same house for Sophie's sake. But I had evidence. I sent her a photograph of our Christmas card from that year, the one with all three of us smiling, arms around each other, a happy family in matching pajamas. The card had been mailed on December 10th. She had received it. Mark had told her it was just for show, but she had started asking questions after that. And now she was standing on my porch, holding her phone in her hand, looking at me like she was seeing a ghost. I stepped aside. I let her in. Mark was still sitting at the dinner table, his green tie loosened, his second beer in his hand. When he saw Vanessa, his face did something strange. It did not fall. It did not panic. It just went very, very still. The way a deer goes still when it knows it has already been shot. Vanessa looked at him. Then she looked at me. Then she looked at the family photographs on the wall, Sophie's school pictures, our wedding photo, the Christmas card she had just seen on her phone. And she said, very quietly, You told me you were done. You told me she knew. Mark opened his mouth. Nothing came out. I sat down across from him. I folded my hands on the table. And I said the words I had been practicing in my head for 3 months. Mark, I am not going to fight you. I am not going to beg you. I am not going to give you the satisfaction of watching me fall apart, but I am going to take everything you tried to take from me, and I am going to do it legally, quietly, and completely. You are going to pack a bag tonight. You are going to stay with your brother, and you are going to hear from my lawyer in the morning. He stared at me. He looked at Vanessa. He looked back at me. And for one long, terrible second, I saw something in his eyes that I had never seen before. It was not guilt. It was not shame. It was the surprise of a man who had never once considered that the woman he was betraying might be stronger than him. He left that night, not because I asked him to, but because Vanessa asked him to. I watched her walk out the door first, her snowflake earrings catching the porch light one last time, and I watched him follow her like a dog who had finally figured out which hand was holding the leash. He did not say goodbye to me. He did not go upstairs to see Sophie. He just grabbed his coat and his phone and his keys, and he walked out of the house we had bought together, the house where his daughter had learned to walk, the house where he had promised to love me until one of us died. He chose her. In the end, that made everything easier. The divorce took 7 months. 7 months of lawyers and mediators and court dates and sleepless nights. 7 months of Mark alternating between pretending to be sorry and pretending to be angry. He hired a good lawyer, someone expensive who talked about father's rights and marital assets and tried to make me feel like I was the one being unreasonable. But I had evidence. I had everything. The phone records, the credit card statements, the photograph of the text message, a sworn statement from Vanessa, who had finally realized that Mark had been lying to both of us and who agreed to tell the truth about the timeline of their affair. It had started before Sophie was born, before our wedding. Before I ever sat down across from him in that hospital cafeteria and thought he was the kindest man I had ever met. The truth was this: Mark had never left Vanessa. He had just put her on hold while he built a stable life with someone else, someone with a good job, someone who wanted children, someone who would make a safe and reliable wife, while he kept his real emotional life somewhere else. I was not his partner. I was his cover. And when I finally understood that, when I really let myself feel it, I did not cry. I did not get angry. I just felt tired. The kind of tired that reaches all the way down into your bones and lives there. Margaret fought for me like I was her own sister. She got me the house. She got me full custody, with Mark receiving supervised visits every other weekend because the judge did not look kindly on a man who had lied to his daughter for 2 years while she carried his secret alone. She got me a settlement that covered Sophie's college tuition and left me with enough to start over without panic. And she got me something I had not asked for but desperately needed: the quiet satisfaction of watching Mark sit in a courtroom and listen to his own words read aloud. His own texts, his own lies, his own promises to another woman while he was still wearing his wedding ring. He did not look at me during the final hearing. Not once. He stared at the table in front of him like it held the answers to every question he had never bothered to ask himself. I looked at him, though. I looked at him for a long time, trying to find the man I had fallen in love with, the man who held the elevator door and listened to me cry about a patient I could not save. He was in there somewhere, buried under years of selfishness and convenience and the terrible belief that he was entitled to whatever he wanted, no matter who it hurt. I felt sorry for him. That surprised me. But I did. 6 months later, Sophie and I painted the living room. She chose the color a soft sage green, nothing like the pale gray Mark had insisted on when we first moved in. We painted it together on a Saturday in October with the windows open and the smell of leaves coming in from the yard. She was taller now, almost as tall as me. She had stopped running her tongue over her teeth and started wearing her hair in a long braid down her back, the way I used to wear mine when I was her age. She looked like me. She sounded like me. And she was starting to heal in ways I was still learning to name. We kept the piano. We kept the Christmas dishes. We kept the garden, though I had to ask Janet from across the street to help me figure out which plants needed to be cut back and which ones would come back on their own in the spring. Janet brought over coffee and her sparkly sneakers, and she did not ask me how I was doing. She just worked beside me in the dirt, pulling up dead things and making room for new ones. That is what friendship looks like when you are not looking for it. It looks like someone who shows up and does not ask you to perform your pain for them. I have not dated anyone. I am not ready. I do not know if I will ever be ready. But I have stopped waiting for the other shoe to drop. I have stopped checking phone records and credit card statements. I have stopped looking at my reflection in dark windows and wondering what I did wrong. I did not do anything wrong. I loved someone who was not capable of loving me back the way I deserved. That is not a crime. That is not a failure. That is just a thing that happens to good people every single day. The moral of this story is not that all men are liars. It is not that love is a trap. It is not that you should build walls so high that no one can ever hurt you again. The moral is simpler and harder than all of that. It is this: when someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. Do not wait for the Christmas dinner. Do not wait for the text message. Do not wait for your daughter to tell you the truth because she cannot bear to watch you smile at a woman who is sitting in your chair. You already know. Some part of you has always known. The hard part is not finding out the truth. The hard part is deciding what you are going to do with it. Sophie is 15 now. She played piano at her school's winter recital last month. She wore a green dress and she played a piece by Chopin, something soft and sad and beautiful. And when she finished, she looked out into the audience and found my eyes the way she always used to. She smiled. I smiled back. And I thought about how far we had come from that hallway floor, from that Christmas night, from that terrible moment when I thought my life was over. It was not over. It was just starting to look different. And different, I am learning, can be its own kind of wonderful.